Hello, my name is Carla Anderson, all right, but I got married in there and a while back, and so my last name was actually Paradowski. Yeah, Audrey is going to help me if I get lost, so to speak, or can't remember something. And just know that I can't see you where the details are concerned. So if you're trying to get my attention or say something to me, you're gonna have to make it so I can see it, which is a joke because I can't. So anyway, okay, as soon as Audrey gets settled, okay. All right. I'm gonna start out early in my life because if you don't know the beginning of how things came about, you won't realize the trauma and what I had to go through in order to get to even 7 years old. When my mom got pregnant with me, my dad tried to push her down the flight of stairs, and fortunately his mom came around the corner and stopped him. So right then and there was the first situation that came up. My mom was married 5 times, and most of the husbands that she married were very abusive. They didn't want me around. Nobody did. My grandma did, my grandpa, and the 12 siblings of my grandfather are the people who raised me. But at the beginning, it was really traumatic because I was born with weak lungs, lung disease came on fast and easily, and a weak heart. And so with the lung disease, it just made it even harder to do anything. So the first thing that happened was my mom and my dad took me I lived in a little town of 900 people. And most of those people were relatives, actually. And my mom and dad moved to Rockford, Illinois, from Pecatonic, Illinois, which was 20 miles from Rockford. And when they moved there, I was there with them about a month, 2 months, and they decided they didn't want me around because I'd cry and, do what babies do. So they put me in an orphanage. And that worked out until the hospital bills kept coming in, and the orphanage called my grandparents and asked my grandma, it was midnight when this happened, and asked if my grandmother could come and get me because they couldn't afford to keep me anymore. I was too sick. And so she came with her mom. So my grandma Florence and my great grandma Augusta came to pick me up at midnight from the orphanage. I stayed with grandma all through the beginning part of the years of my life. And I'm on track, correct? Sure. Okay. And then my mom got married to this fella, and I was living with my grandparents, as I said. And the next thing I know, his mom and dad came. They were very, they weren't nice people, let's put it that way. They were very abusive. They came to get me. My mom wasn't there. All I could feel is I was being stolen from my grandmother and grandpa. And grandma kept saying, please don't take her, please don't take her. And she was crying. And they did. They said, get her stuff put together, get in the car, and they had a station wagon and they laid the back seat down in the station wagon. And they took off for Colorado. She couldn't stop it because my mom had the authority at that point, and they wanted me down there. But the only reason they wanted me I would eventually end up in Temple, Texas, because that's where Bob was stationed. My stepdad was stationed there, and my dad was in the military. He worked on an aircraft carrier and he was a mechanic for them. He made a nice salary, and also the child support part of the salary was very handsome. So my mom and my stepdad wanted that money. But they had to have me where they were at least the first time the people came to look to make sure there was a child. So I got hauled down to Colorado, and as I said, Bob's parents were really abusive, and next thing I know, I was in Temple, Texas. My mom and Bob at the beginning had like a studio. What? Had like a studio apartment, and I was tucked off in this corner with just a bed. And it had a sink and a refrigerator, but it was all one open room like this. And as I couldn't get up to go, I could get up to go to the bathroom. I couldn't go outside and play. And I was 3.5 at that point. And Bob was extremely abusive. Once a day he would make me an egg and toast, and that's what I got to eat for the whole day. That went on for over a year because they had to move out of that place to get into an apartment with bedrooms because they were going to investigate, the military was going to investigate that I had the proper type of things. And so, but I was real confined. Well, when they got ready to move, I was put in an orphanage again. And I remember that orphanage really bad, really well. And there was some abusiveness that went with that as well. I can't even remember all of it. I just know that I cried, and when I cried, I got hit. So I stopped crying. I had to find a way to just tuck my feelings inside and not let them show and not let them be there. And eventually, when the military came, Bob came and got me, and I got taken to that apartment. And she was just off visiting, and so they brought me home to that place, and I ended up, they ended up being approved. And after they were approved and everything was secure and they knew that the military people weren't coming back to investigate anything else, they let my grandparents know that I had to come back. Now I'm in Temple, Texas, and I have to go up to, let's say, Rockford, Illinois, from Temple, Texas. Well, I gotta back up one thing, because I forgot about the bathroom, the outhouse. I went out to play one day, and Bob caught me out playing, and I was never supposed to be out of the house. And as I was playing, I got scared when he came home because he was screaming, and then he went in the house screaming at my mom, and I went into the outhouse that was behind at the trailer park that we were at that point, and he went back, and I crawled up on the bathroom in the outhouse where you would go potty. And I crawled up and I locked the door. This lady that also had some children that I played with when I could get out to play. And she came and knocked on the door and she said, "Honey, open the door." So I did. I recognized her voice and I opened the door and she said, "Sweetheart, what are you doing?" And she noticed that I had put rocks, little pebble rocks, up my nose and in my ears. And she said, "Why do you have those in your nose and your ears? That's no good. You can't do that. Why did you do that?" And I said, "Because I want to go home. I want to go home to Jesus because Jesus really loves me." And my grandmother had been reading the Bible to me. She never read fairy tales or anything like that. At night she read the Bible. So I had all kinds of Bible stories in my head. And that when she couldn't read to me, she'd tell Grandpa, "Tell her a story," or whatever, because she would be busy. And Grandpa told me, and my sister and I both laugh about this. Grandpa's fairy tale story was about Goldilocks and the three pigs going to Paris, and they rode on a Ferris wheel. Don't know if you guys ever knew that, but that's the way that story went. So he was really a neat guy. Anyway, back to the other, I ended up getting shipped back to Pecatonica from Temple, Texas, on a train. My grandparents sent the ticket to have me shipped home. And ship was right because nobody came with me. 4 years old, I'm on a train all by myself. And they had hired a conductor person that would make sure I didn't get off at any of their stops and that I got a meal. And that, so I didn't get lost or leave the train in any way. I did make it. I think it was a 3-day trip or 3 days, 2 or 3 day trip, because they had many stops in between. So I got home and Grandma was waiting on the platform for me, and boy, I was never so happy to see Grandma and know that my aunts and uncles and stuff were there, great aunts and uncles. Grandpa was one of 12. And all 11 of those relatives helped raise me. It was so wonderful. Anyway, and, where am I? Oh yeah, the airplane ride. My one uncle had been in the service and it was a really traumatic situation for him because while he was in the service, his wife was riding with somebody and got killed in a car accident because a cow walked out on the road. And he never could get past that. He was mentally unbalanced to some degree. And he came up to me at one point and he said, "Carla, come on with me." His name was Uncle Lou. He says, "Uncle Lou wants to take you. Do you want to fly in an airplane?" And I thought, yeah, but I got to go tell my grandma. He said, no, we're not telling Grandma. I already took care of that. And so I ended up getting on that plane. It was a crop duster, so it was open. I don't know if you've ever seen crop dusters or not, but it was all open, man. And we flew all around Winnebago County and some of Stevenson County in Illinois. And then we came back, and of course that little facility was in Pecatonica. And so we came back, and I got back in the car and went home, and my grandmother saw us pull in, and she said, "Where were you?" I was worried, I couldn't find you. And I said, "I went in a plane." And I was so excited that I had seen all this stuff and what have you. And she said, "Well, I was praying." And I said, "Do you know Jesus made all that stuff?" look at all those, you know, and I started describing all the stuff I had seen and stuff, and the cows and all the, you know, farms and what have you. And I said, Jesus made that stuff, Grandma. He made those animals and stuff. Well, so anyway, my uncle got in trouble because Grandma said, you go play, you go in the house and play or do whatever, but I'm going to talk to Uncle Lou. Well, needless to say, Uncle Lou didn't talk to me for a while, and but that was home for me. And I loved my Uncle Joe, and he was one of the older boys of the 6 boys, and he had Hodgkin's disease at the end. And I would bring my little stuffed lamb over, and he had a hospital bed with a what's that called, Pat? Trapeze. And on it, and I would put that lamb on there, and he and I would send that lamb all over the country, all over the world. You know? We had a good time with it. But then he died when I was 5, and I had a really hard time with that because during the summer before he died, Aunt Tina would take him out and put him in the yard and bring a tray of food out, and I would feed him. Heaven only knows what he looked like when I got done because I was 5 years old. But anyway, it was wonderful. But when he died and Grandma and Grandpa took me to the funeral home, I saw him laying in this box. And I thought, oh, he's just sleeping. I always crawl in bed with him when he's sleeping. And so I tried to crawl up to the casket area. And fortunately, Grandpa had turned around and started running back because I was going to crawl in the casket and we could play. And the casket was wobbling really bad. So anyway, he got me out of, got me away from that and gave me a couple pieces of candy and put me on his lap and said, we can't go up there anymore. Okay. So then, what's the next thing? Mom and Tom. Okay. Mom did get married to one fella that was really a nice guy. It was my sister's father. And Tom was just really, really sweet. And I had a lot of respiratory problems at that time too, and so I missed a lot of school off and on, and Mom had a fit. She would spank me, she would tell me I'm stupid, you don't know what you're doing. I had dyslexia, so she just knew I was playing around, I could really do the work, but I couldn't see. I couldn't do it. I mean, I could see, but I couldn't get everything together with the dyslexia. So anyway, time went forward, and I got involved with what? Judy, is that next? Oh, yeah. I graduated high school, and then I got married. And I had a little girl, and her name was Andrea. And then had our marriage annulled shortly after we got married because he really had a sweetheart that he had had all through school. We all thought he was going to marry Pat, and I don't know what happened, but they broke up for a couple of years. And in between that time, he met me and decided we were going to get married. Grandma was afraid because he wasn't coming around anymore, because my mom was very interesting. She had schizophrenia, and she spent more time in bars and beds than anything else. I mean, she must have known just about every man in town, married or not, physically. And Grandma was afraid I was going to be labeled as, let's use a better term, floozy. And so she wanted me out of the way. So that didn't happen. My cousin was just going to college down in Southern Illinois in Alton, Illinois. And so at Edwardsville University. And so I went down there and I had Andrea with me, and good old lungs gave me a fit. And I passed out taking Judy to the doctor. Once I got her in the doctor waiting area, I went down. I never saw it coming. I didn't know what was going to happen. And I went down. The next thing I opened my eyes, I was in a hospital bed with double pneumonia and all kinds of complications with that. The nun came in and she had me said, "You've got to sign these papers because we got to be able to take care of your baby while you're in the hospital if something happens, because we got to have your permission to get, help for her if she needs it." So I barely could think, and I signed the papers, and then I got better and I went home. No baby. Not only no baby, no diapers, no bottles, no nothing. Walking around the house, you would never know I had a child. I didn't. The only thing they didn't get is the baby bottle that was underneath the front seat of the car. So when I stopped one day, it rolled out. That was the only thing I had left. They had put her up for adoption. They said, "Well, you signed the adoption papers." I thought, "No, I didn't. No, I didn't. I want my baby back." Well, I didn't get her. I didn't get her back. That was a done deal. The Catholic Charities was very strict about things like that. So without Andrea, I decided Judy was finished with my cousin who was quadriplegic, and that's why I was taking care of her. We went back up to, to Pecatonica, Rockford area, and I decided I wanted to do something with my life. So I got my cousin, Judy's sister, I got her to take care of Judy, and I started out on my own. And I wanted to go to school again. I had dyslexia, and I had no money to pay for school. So I went to the University of Illinois area or whatever. I don't know what it was called, I can't remember now. But they had to test me to make sure that I would qualify, because they couldn't just give me a student loan if I wasn't going to be able to handle the classes and everything. So I went through testing, mental testing, IQ testing, and they found out I wasn't an idiot, actually. I was up there with Einstein kind of thing. I thought that was so stupid, but that's what they said, and my IQ test was extremely high. So I wasn't dumb. Then they found out when they tested me that I had the dyslexia, and that's what was causing the problem with my being able to read and understand what I was getting. The teachers would talk to me so I could pass my tests, because when they didn't read me things and tell me, hello, oh, there, tell me what it said, I couldn't get it. I could not get it at all. And so that's how I ended up passing and getting through high school, was I had some really wonderful instructors that helped me. Went to junior college, didn't have to have anything to go to junior college, but I had to take a couple pre-courses in English and things like that. And those teachers did the same thing. They helped me by reading the materials to me. I knew what it was once they read it to me. And I passed the tests with A's and B's. Then I wanted to go to college because I started, well, let me go back. I started working at the Bethesda Hospital in Chicago, and um, I started out as a respiratory therapist. But I wanted more. So I went to the University of Illinois, and that's when I had to have all these tests. And they had to teach me that they said, we've got one problem. In college, you're not going to have somebody to read you the materials and everything. We don't have time for all of that. So they sent me to see if they could do something about the dyslexia. Well, I could explain what I had to learn, but I got through the learning process, silly as it was, but it worked. It retrained my brain, and I could actually read and digest what I was reading and remember what I was reading. So I got through college, and I wanted to go into nursing, so I did that. And I worked in ICU, CCU. I was mainly stationed for CCU, but when they had some issues and things that they had to have some more staff over in intensive care, I would have to do that. I would go over and help them, but I still had to run back over to coronary care because that was my main place. It was wonderful, and this is when my life started really turning upside down. There was a lab tech who decided, he was from India, and he would talk to me all the time. He said, I have a yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. I had clean clothes. It wasn't laundry. It was yeah, well anyway, he had a business, and he asked me, dry cleaner, and he asked me if I would want to work there, because I worked the 3 to 11 shift. And I said, because with his wife went back to India for a while to visit family and everything, and I said, sure, I'll help. Well, that worked out for a while, and it was really good, and it helped me financially even better and stuff like that. And all of a sudden, he came in one day, and he was behind me, and he was looking through the pile of clothes that were back there and everything, and he said, I shouldn't say he said, he came up behind me, and he grabbed me, and he threw me onto the clothes, and he raped me. And I couldn't even talk myself into staying at that hospital. I just wanted to go back to Pecatonica and Rockford and be home. I couldn't handle it anymore. So what? Yeah, Rockford's good. What else? Huh? Oh yeah. So I got back to Rockford, and I decided to go back to school because I wanted to work in behavior ed. And I didn't take the mental or the learning disability kids, I took the behavior kids. So I worked in BD, worked with the behavior BD kids. And that was really interesting. In order to keep my kids out of timeout, because timeout was where they were put when they wouldn't behave and nobody could get them to do anything. And I thought, I don't want my kids running in there all the time, because it meant that you weren't doing your job as a teacher. Well, it was fun because the first couple weeks of having the kids, and I had the kids from ninth grade, ninth grade to 12th. And I would come in the room at night, open my desk drawer, and there'd be a garden snake. And it was like, oh yeah, I'd better not make any kind of weird comments or moves or anything, because I will have a herd of snakes in here if I do. So even though it was horrible, I picked it up and my whole body was just draining. I must have been sheet white. Anyway, and I said, oh look, I got a present. And I went up to the kids, and a number of the boys went, get it away from me. And then some didn't, obviously. And so I said, I think we better take this outside, because I don't think he likes it in here. I felt like opening the window, it was on the second floor, and throwing it out the window. But I didn't. I was nice. I went downstairs, and all the while I was just, and I got rid of it. Well, since I had 12 kids, and they didn't have the reaction from me they wanted. About 2 weeks later, I ended up with mice in my drawer. Oh, look, these little babies, they're so sweet. Do you want to hold, kind of thing. Oh, they didn't get the reaction they wanted. So they stopped doing that kind of stuff. It was interesting because I decided, as I said, I didn't want my kids in behavior ed. In timeout. So I decided we're going to learn, when it was warm weather outside, we're going to do science outside in the parks and things like that. I got special permission from the principal and the head of the behavior ed department for the local area of Rockford and all around, to be able to take those kids on site to certain situations and be able to let them hands-on feel and look and see. So we did that, and they loved it. And I didn't have any kids running away. I didn't have any kids fighting or beating on each other. So we had a fun time. Then I decided, as the weather started getting colder, I got a couple friends that hunt. So on the back bulletin board in the back of my classroom, I tacked up a deer hide, and we had to render it. And if you rendered it right, you could have some of it. But if you didn't learn how to do it correctly, then you couldn't have it. So needless to say, that went over big, but you had to have your work done. You had to have your homework done. Math, which they hated, and a couple other things. And then I put on this really soft music, and they would go back, and they would get permission to go back in the back of the room and do these things. That all worked out. I ended up with, birds. I ended up with some birds back there that they could take the feathers and render them. They had been killed on the road or whatever, and I wanted to show them how to do those things and explain how God made these animals. And, what God felt about animals and things and how precious they were. And they would pet those animals and stuff. It would be fabulous. And we did other things. We went fishing. We went, doing other things. I taught them how to get a fish out of the water, and then how to skin it, or whatever you call that. I know it's not skinning, but anyway, so that went on, and my kids never ended up in behavior ed. In timeout. They went on to another situation after they got past ninth grade. no, 7, 8, 9, ninth grade. And they went to college. One of my very strong students who excelled like crazy went to a football game at the high school. And I can't remember all the details now, this was quite a while ago. But he fell off the bleachers, cracked his head, and ended up in the hospital. And he never recuperated from all of that. So, it hurt me so bad because these kids became my kids, you know. I put 3 years of time in on them. It was really tough when that happened to him. But then, okay. After that, I went to Florida, and that's where I ended up buying a health food store. And I ended up being robbed at gunpoint. At first I thought it was a toy gun and it was just something funny, but it wasn't. It was real. I had 2 customers and 2 workers there that day, and I heard Gail in front. She was running the cash register, and I heard her in front say, "No, I can't do that. It's not my money." And all of a sudden, I came out of the back room because I was back there with somebody. I was back there with somebody. And I can't think, hold on. So I came out of the back room and I could see something shining. And as a result, I went to Gail and I said, you go in the back. I'll take care of this. And so I ended up with him not liking how much money I had in the cash register. I said, we just opened an hour ago. I haven't had time to get any amount of money. Well, let's go in the back. You must have. And at that time, the gun was right here. All the time, pressing hard on my head. And I didn't want my customers or my workers to get hurt because they came because I owned the store and I opened the door and unlocked it. So it was my responsibility to make sure they didn't get hurt, is how I was taught. And we went in the back room and I had 5, I know you guys must know about the zipper bags that you can get from the bank. And he said, what about those bags down there? And I said, those are bank bags. And I said, okay, but they only have receipts in them. So I opened the first one. He said, what are all those papers? And I said, those are receipts. Well, isn't there any money in there? No. And then he said, well, what about the next one? I said, they're receipts, I'm telling you. And sure enough, it was a bag full of receipts. He went through 3 before he lost his temper and said, this is crazy. I got to get out of here. And if he'd have gone one more bag down, there was $1,500 in the bag. But he never saw it because he got frustrated. In the meantime, I still had a gun to my head. And so I went, he went out, took off and went out the door. And he started running across the field and then into the wooded area. What I didn't know was the little boy that helped his dad in the store next door saw the gun. And he told his dad, he said, "There's a guy out there with a gun, Dad." So the dad called the police, and all of a sudden, the guy had just left and gone into the field, going towards the trees and everything. I heard a helicopter. And then I saw flashing lights coming around. And I eventually got to talk to one of the police officers. And I said, "Was that gun real?" Because I thought it was probably not really real. It was just something that would threaten somebody, and especially in a situation that was really tough to be in. And he said, yes, not only was it real, it was loaded and it was cocked, ready to fire. Anyhow, I made sure my customers and my employees got out without being hurt or traumatized with having guns at them or swinging around or anything else. I made sure that guy kept his focus on me. I walked around and told, "Where are you going?" I did this, "What are you doing?" And I thought, I don't know why God just saved me. That's all there was to it. He saved me. And because there's no way that guy shouldn't have shot me with all the junk I was doing. He wanted me to pull the phone off the wall, and I said, "Can't do that. There are 16 feet shelves on that wall, and the cord for the phone went behind it." I said, "If I pull that phone off the wall, all those shelves are coming down on the floor." And I said, "Do you think it's going to draw attention by the people next door?" "I think so." He didn't know. He said, "Well, forget it." And I said, "I'll give you the receiver." Of course, I still could have made a phone call. But he said, I'll give you the receiver, and then I can't talk to anybody. I can't call anybody. "Oh, okay, fine." So he left. As I said, he left, and the helicopter found him, and the police came and everything. But after that, I wanted to go home. I wanted to go back to Rockford, well, really back to Pecatonica. And what did they do after that? What?
Can I just say something?
Yeah.
I'm not, your speech was great, it's great. What we want to do, because we're gonna have to wrap it up, because people gotta do it. What we want you to do is tell us what your point with regard to your walk with Christ. Your walk with Christ.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, and then we're gonna wrap it up.
Okay. What's next? Okay, yeah, just a couple of seconds here, and then I'll explain all that. Anyway, I ended up back in Illinois, and then I came to Wisconsin, and I married Bob, my husband. The life was fantastic, but Bob passed away. I went to work, and I got a phone call at work. He had gone in to have his catheter changed, and he ended up on the floor in the hospital. He was dead. They could never revive him, so they told me I had to come and do whatever. So, okay, Charlene wanted me to tell you about being saved. I got saved when I was 7 years old. My grandma had me go in the bedroom and kneel by the bed with her and ask Jesus in my heart. Did I ever do anything goofy after 7 years old? Sure I did. Did I ever not walk away, but have fun with what was going on out there? Sure I did. But I always came back to the Lord because He saved me when I was coming back to Wisconsin. He saved me from getting hit in Milwaukee. And I mean, I was waiting for the car to get crunched because the truck in front of me had almost stopped dead still. Angels Demon must have got the car because I never got hit. And I could explain more about what happened. The other thing that happened that told me that God was always taking care of me was Bev and I went into her grandma's house the second time. We had already gone through the house once, but then there was winter and we came back in the spring. And the second time I went to walk out from whatever room that was into the kitchen area, and I went down, I broke through the floor. There was a weak spot, and I broke through the floor. This leg came up and hugged my chest, but this leg went all the way through, like I would have ended up in the basement. Bev said, "Oh, let me help you," and I said, no, because all the wood around was weak. And all I needed to do was have somebody try to drag me and we'd both be in the basement. For sure. And all I remember about it, and Bev can't remember anymore either, but I can remember having the wood scraping on my leg as I'm raised up and set over on safe ground. Neither one of us remember. It's like it almost, anyway. But that's one of the things the Lord, I've got lots of little things that the Lord did, but those are the couple that are really big. Really, really big. Yes. Yeah. I think I already explained this a little bit, but Bonnie wants me to say a little bit more on it. That because of how I was raised, because of Grandma being the one who taught me how to love the Lord, and that Jesus was always with me, God was always behind me. And yes, bad things happened, but on top of it, there was always God. He was always behind. And nothing was more important than that. And that's why, even when I went through a lot of the trauma, I could manage it, because where other people didn't have God, they would have flipped out or done something. I didn't. Because did it hurt me? Did I cry? Did I get scared? Of course. But I always knew I had God.
Amen.
Amen. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.